So the recording's in progress. The last person joining us is Margie, who's right across the way here. But well, it's funny, I haven't seen her here. I can actually call her and see if there's any problem with the, because then we can get going. Better not phone Kent Wong because that's who I just. Ken, I'm sorry, I sent it off to your Gmail. It came up rather than the TELUS one. So my
Oh, okay.
yeah, my
Not a problem, Paul.
yeah. And thank you for stepping in on the salon too. And yeah,
Yeah, you've been a big help, Kent. It's great.
yeah.
Who did I step in for?
Oh, maybe you
You did
volunteered
the
on your own.
jury.
I heard by the grapevine that you actually had stepped in. So uh,
No, he was my first call. So
excellent. Okay, well that's good to know. And I love a jury.
Been forwarded to voicemail.
I love a jury chair that doesn't mind doing a callback or challenging. Most jury chairs will not do that. And yeah.
Yeah, trying to develop a course right now to train people to become jury chairs. So that's going to be the tough part. How do you test them?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I'm not a believer in, you pay your dues or you pay your fee and then you get a certificate after the fact. Well, how do you know the person's going to be efficient or effective in that particular role? So,
Absolutely. That's why we check out pilots and surgeons, right?
yep.
You don't want somebody flying the plane that doesn't know how to fly all four at the right RPMs. Um, well, I'll wait just a minute. Margie was on early. I didn't send the link out too early. I've learned in life not to send the link too early, or if I loses it. I'm definitely a 10 minute before the meeting starts, send the link out guy. I'll just I'll get started a little bit here with it. First of all, I feel like I'm definitely in the imposter syndrome here, talking about black and white conversions, because I'm in no way an expert on this. I'm just fairly experienced and been doing it for a long period of time. So I'm just going to show you kind of what I do and how I arrive at the endpoint that I'm at. And if it's of any help, and we'll stop along the way and just sort of see if there's anything I can share with you or questions you have. But I only really know the way that I do it and how I've kind of developed it, and it's basically straight out of Photoshop. I don't have any magic applications or programs that I use. I did in the past use Nik software, the Silver FX, which I think is probably, of all the ones I've ever tried, by far the best. The problem is that if you ever take it and then go to print something out of that, or work on it, say for a competition, or where you really it has all sorts of funny things that it does to it, and it bakes a lot of stuff into it, so you can't really give your own personal black and white input into it. And that's why I don't use any of the programs anymore. But I did, and I cut my teeth on it, and they're excellent. And if you take 28 images and you got to suddenly put them out for the next day, have at it in Nik software, Silver FX, because you'll find one that just works for what you've done. And I think it's a great place to sort of start. Look at the free trial on it, give it a little bit of a shot. But all it does is you're going to be pecking through their terms, that sort of say Silver Midnight or whatever. And then you say, oh, that works really well, but you really won't know what you've done with the image in order to arrive at the black and white. So your education stops in Silver FX at choosing what you can use. But it's a great way, if you got to suddenly crank out I had to, for rodeo once, have 60 images for the next morning. And I've got to admit, I went into Silver FX and just, cranked them out of that, because it was the only kind of, way to get it done in that period of time. But what I'm just going to talk to you guys about, and this is really fun because both of you know so much about this stuff. Oh, here she comes. Good. There's Margie. Both of you know so much about Photoshop and about photography that this will be extremely facile and easy for you. I just want to make sure that it makes sense to you. The very basic, like this is subthalamic kind of stuff to arrive where I am. And I didn't just trip over it. I've tried really hard to learn how to do this well. And I have gone to a lot of courses in black and white. I look for black and white images, and I'll talk a little bit about what images are going to make good black and white images, because there's a saying in orthopedic surgery that you can't make chicken salad or chicken shit. So there's no reason for starting with an image that's going to go nowhere. You might as well have, a black and white visualization in your head before you even start. And I have actually a lot of fun with it. I'll be driving along a road somewhere and suddenly the brakes go on, or I'll do a reverse and go back, because in my mind, there's a black and white image there that I would like to, kind of play with. Hi, Margie.
Hi. Sorry, I was, I thought it was 1:15.
Well, I said that's when I'd put out the
Yeah.
initial.
Oh, that's okay. That's great. Anyway, hi to everybody. Hi, Steve.
Why don't you and Steve unmute just for a second, because I don't think everybody knows one of the best photographers in British Columbia, Margie Krause, who lives across the street from me. And it was really fun. I got to be her mentor. And so over 4 years convinced her, oh, you got to join the PPLC, and you got images for accreditation. Let's get you accredited. And then now she's out there winning national, competitions over 4 years, plus getting the front cover of a lot of sailing magazines and other productions. So I've sort of witnessed this rocket ship ride beside me, and it's fun now because, of course, she's now teaching me stuff, which is only fair. Anyway,
you're way too complimentary. Thank you so much, Paul. Paul's been so helpful to me. It's just I couldn't have done it without him. Exclamation mark. He's been just such a great mentor.
Well, it's been
an encourager.
You'll find that in our association, most people are like that, willing to share, willing to mentor, willing to help fellow member. So welcome to the club.
Thank you. Hi, Kent. And hi, Steve. Nice to see you.
Yeah, hi, Margie.
So she goes by Margie rather than Margie.
Margie. Okay.
I know. I spell it funny.
Yeah. And Margie,
that's okay. I used to spell my name with an R in my last name. That's a joke. Come on, you guys.
Yeah, Margie, you're with White and Wong. If you're wondering what's going on. But Margie, all you missed was I just said that the only programs that I've found useful have been the Nik Silver FX, and that it has limitations because it just gives you a product. You don't know what you've really done with your image, and to take it to a level that everybody on this call would want to really do black and whites with, which would be, masterful contrast, working with emotion, recession, midtones, recognizing a good black and white image. Silver FX will not do it for you. But if you got to produce 60 images in a hurry in black and white, find the one that works for you in Silver FX and use it. So, and there are many other programs out there that I've used over the years. None of them really do as good a job as the Silver FX for black and white conversion. But again, learn to do it on your own from basics, and you'll be so much further ahead. So does that make sense what I'm going to go into right now? And again, there's nothing in this that's difficult. Okay, it's all the Photoshop stuff that you guys taught me over the years. It's kind of quite basic, but it's where you start that's sometimes very important. And so I'm going to see if I can bring up a bit of my screen here, see what happens. You guys got a screen up there of an image or nothing?
Yes.
Okay, you got a police car in front of you?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm just gonna, sorry to bring up any terms, but I think this is really, I just thought of 4 things that I'll be talking about quite a bit on this little session, and just to make sure we're all on exactly the same page. So in black and white, the biggest thing is how are you dealing with your contrast? Because contrast gives you the gesture, the emotion, the depth, and the sincerity of your image. So And you can't just take a color image, desaturate it, and put a lot of contrast in it and get a great black and white. But it is something you work with quite a bit. And there's other ways to achieve contrast. You'll keep working back, but mostly it's contrast. When we talk about it, just bright to darkness. It's just if you have a really high contrast image, you're going to have bright highlights, and you're going to have dark shadows. And dark shadows with no detail is called negative space. And negative space is usually rewarded in the PPOC judging with no detail off eliminated, or white, pure white, which is positive, a space on an image is also usually rewarded with, they click it out. I'm not dishing the judges on PPOC, but most of them are not facile enough or experienced enough in true black and white to deal with that. So just be very careful. If you create a black spot with a black and white image for your own use, it's fabulous. For higher competitions is great, but be very cautious in PPOC, because black holes, the judges just jump at it technically, and it's not because they're not good judges. It's just their level of sophistication in black and white is not always there. Sometimes there'll be somebody in the panel that will defend it, but I just kind of warn you with the whole contrast thing. And when you take the image, when you first work with it, you want to know which image, and I'm going to go through a bunch of examples, is going to hold contrast well. So when you take the image, you think right away, oh, this is a black and white. I see this going forward. And you must remember, of course, that not all black and white images need to be high contrast. I would, from my experience, if you want to do okay in competitions, though, a middle contrast, very subtle black and white, like a nice fog scene, is sometimes a hard thing to get by the judges. They just say, this is a muddy image. So in PPOC, maybe not what you want to be producing for competition, but for your own work, it gives you the mood, gesture, feeling, sincerity that you're kind of looking for. So remember, it doesn't always have to be the Ansel Adams complete, high contrast black and white. I'll be using clarity quite a bit when I run through stuff. And it's remember, it's the tonality again, but it's only in the middle tone. So when you're working with clarity, the really, really bright stuff and the really dark stuff is not affected as much as the stuff in the middle tones. So this helps to focus an area in the actual image that you're working on. When we jump into dehaze, again, this is a really sophisticated thing in Photoshop that's an absolute wonder, because it used to take many, many steps to create dehaze, but now they've got a slider for it, which is great. And again, it gets rid of the really high contrast areas and works just on the mid-tones. Mostly it's bringing out details, but as you increase your dehaze, the appearance of the entire image is going to get a bit darker. So then you kind of work back and you put your actual brightness of your image up to compensate for it. So if you're working with dehaze and suddenly the image starts to go dark, don't panic, because as long as you're working in RAW or have lots of pixels to play with, you'll be able to bring it up with a little bit of brightness. And then the last thing I'm going to just harp on before we get going is shadow detail, because this is a crutch that we all learn to use, is to jump in and we get a dark area, and it will bring up a detail in the shadows, but a huge caveat: it'll introduce noise and grain into that shadow area. And there's lots of workarounds for it. Don't panic. It's not that you can't use it, but you're far better to create a layer back in Photoshop, and we'll do that as I go through. Create a layer and then brighten that layer and then brush it in. The difference that you get with that is just incredible. You will get, very close to your original image without the loss of detail, without the introduction of the grain and the introduction of the noise. Sometimes you want grain, but control your own grain when you do that. So any questions on that, that little overview of terms we're going to use?
Nope, I'm good.
I know you're good, but are you okay with the...
Yeah, all good.
All right, okay. And I focus on those only because they, they're it's important to sort of make sure we're on the same page when we work through this. And I'm going to, in a minute, I'm going to actually, we'll get an image and work through it. And so that's the important part today, is to watch kind of what I do. And you'll say, Christ, I could have done that. What the hell's going on here? And you all are within a couple of steps of creating really good black and whites, I assure you. But you want them to be personalized. You want them to be your own. So
good explanation, Paul, on all those things. Thank you.
Okay, well, doesn't mean I really know what they're all about, but I can explain them, sort of thing. Anyway, so this is this is a workshop I did with Mark Kegel in Saskatchewan, and it was all about black and white. And he didn't give us a whole lot of teaching on how to, process them or how to shoot them, but he took us to places and let us see and focus on what's going on. And I'm just going to run through these fairly quickly to show you, what would be a black and white image, when I shoot it, and what I would look at converting. So this one, if I converted this, I'd be all over the map trying to make a reasonable black and white out of that. I just know it. There's not isolation. There's colors that are very close in tonality. It just ain't going to be a great black and white image. This one, as soon as we walked onto the scene, I know right away I see a black and white here. And this is what my end image is going to be. The image has excellent isolation. The monochromatic sky, which most, if you're in a competition, they'll say this would do better with a replaced sky. I just want to always scream, "Oh, bullshit!" This is kind of what the tone and what it's all about, and the emotion of what's going on. But these trees against a background are just such a dynamic thing to be working with. A little bit of grass coming through, the wind has been working away in it. So I look at an image and I'm in black and white, I'm going to see a lot of emotion in it and storytelling of what's going on. And these Siberian or Manitoba elms that they have in the prairies, they used to call them Siberian elms, but then that went out of fashion because they weren't supposed to talk about Russia too much. But they were introduced from Europe as windbreaks, and the hardiest trees in the prairies. You see them everywhere. They'll withstand drought. They can take high temperatures. They can withstand huge rainstorms, and when they freeze for a long period of time, they come up the next year in good stead. Every other tree out there kind of dies, but these live. So if you kind of know a little bit about the the history of these trees and why they came there, again, it's a dynamic kind of image. Again, I'm seeing a black and white when I get going. So does that sort of speak to you a little bit about what I go and I look for before I even start any processing? Take your mics off, hammer into this. This is not like a one-way teaching session.
No, I'm good so far.
Well,
I'm good.
I know you're good, but am I wasting your time or I mean, I see emotion in an image that I go to shoot, and you will too.
Are you doing a focus stacking there?
No, it's a single shot. I've got the criteria at the side. It's 1/125th, 5.6. At 60 millimeters. I've probably got my 24-120 Nikon Margie.
Yeah. And
I've got no compensation in this one. You'll see quite often I'll put a little bit of compensation in for the snow because I know it'll go dark. And this is handheld. At 1/125th, I move around better without a tripod. I get better images. I don't mind setting a tripod up for longer exposure, but with our modern cameras, I love my tripod, always got it with me, but this one would have been handheld for sure, as I just walked until I found the best isolation of the very modern stacks, the grain elevators amongst the trees.
Oh, Paul.
Yeah.
This image bothers me because the blown out highlights on the snow just pull my eye right away. And how do I get around that?
Well, you could go in and one, crop them out, two, darken them. But I don't see those. I see those as the real whites that I see when I'm looking through a winter scene in Saskatchewan. But it's possible, if you look at the histogram to the right, you see where the whites are. I got a lot of latitude to drop those back. And if it's blowing out, I can bring it up in Photoshop. But here's about 220, here's 256, white with no details. So I would argue that, in fact, the whites in here are, in fact, in the category of white with detail. I can still see white with detail, but I know as a as a judge, immediately it's the perception, and yes, they're blowing out to your eye.
So without seeing a histogram at the competition level, how do I, as a judge or a jury chair or teaching at the judging clinic, get prospective judges to change how they look at scenes like this?
You'd have to do it out of the competition, bring it up in Photoshop and demonstrate that it's really 220 and it's not blowing out. But you're not going to change anybody's mind in there, Kent, I don't think. As long as, and I've been told that many times, this is a blown out highlight. Even I've had them in the 190s and they've called them blown out because relative to the rest of the image, the white contrast causes them to feel it's blown out. But I would argue, I could bring it up, I wonder if I can do it right now. I won't take the time, but I guarantee that in here, it will be white with detail. Anyway.
Just put your info brush on it, and we should be able to see it.
No, this is photomechanic. It won't.
Oh, okay. All right.
It's just,
we'll ignore it then.
Yeah, I'll get to it a little bit later. Again, I'm searching around for a black and white image on this. This would be okay in color, but I see this as and it's not a super strong image, but as I'm wandering around the same scene, I'm seeing black and white. I showed this to a couple of really good black and white photographers, and they just absolutely defecated on me because it was too editorial. But I'm sort of an editorial photographer, but to be able to isolate, Saskatchewan winter with the school bus and the snow blowing across. Again, I even though it's a really colorful bus in the middle of the prairies, to me it's a black and white. And it's just my kind of opinion.
It would also look good in color, I bet, Paul, with the yellow bus and just the yellow being the only color other than the black and white.
Yep. There's no question about that, except I'm a monochromatic photoilluminist is what I am, and so I think so. You have to give your artist statement all the time, and whenever I'm presenting some black and white, people say, "What's your artist statement?" And I always say, "Well, I'm a monochromatic photoilluminist," and it always keeps the crowd quiet. Anyway, just Mark working away. If anybody ever has the opportunity to spend time with Mark, he's a very patient man at teaching the subthalamic and early people how to make an image work in his trade of black and white. A lot of these I'll skip through. But it's really difficult trying to work an image on this. But I'm trying to make it work in black and white. You can criticize. I'm just going to run through a bunch of these. And this one is an interesting image because it looks pretty good in color with the late light on the single grain elevator, and yet my whole idea in black and white was to emphasize the prairie lines and the specificity of that grain elevator.
So, a question, Paul.
Yep.
If you walk into a scene, what's the first trigger that you'll see in the scene that makes you think black and white? Is it
isolation? Can I isolate something?
Okay.
And that's it's sort of on the same equivalent of emotionally, am I feeling that I have a gesture, a story, an insight here? So I'm almost always looking for some sort of storytelling as soon as I walk into it. And this, the power lines kill through the subject matter, blah, blah. There's lots of reasons this is not a very strong image. And yet for me, on the storytelling, I've got isolated power, which goes down quite often in the winter. I've got a reasonably, modern barn to the right. I've got a useful and working grain elevator, which is now rare as rocking horse manure on the prairies. So this is the story. I was delighted when the light hit over to brighten up this one particular area. But that's
just a comment on that. Had you thought at all about stamping out, getting rid of the power lines and making it, like if you were trying to do this for a competition, maybe bringing in the left side a little bit to just have the trees right up to the edge and then just take out the power lines?
Well, yes, but again, I refer back to the surgical wisdom of you can't make chicken salad with chicken shit. I think starting with a stronger image, if I were going to put it in competition, would be the way to go, to be quite honest. Also, it hurts me, Margie, to take power lines out, like to take real things out of images. A little bit of my soul disappears every time. Anyway, this one I couldn't find an image, and I worked and worked and worked and got a little bit of an image in black and white. So sometimes I just play to try to get, and everybody is shooting from a different angle. I'll walk all over the place. First thing I do usually, I look at the scene, then I go for a walk. And if I have to leave or the light leaves, that's okay. But I will walk around until I find something that works in my noggin. I never could get these frozen, wheat cuttings to work no matter what I did. And then, all these abandoned buildings in the prairies, again, I've got black and white images, but I get stuck into trying to tell the story. So I go back to where they chopped the wood and taken down the trees. And anyway, again, I'm trying to isolate and I had to get down the ground to sort of elevate this abandoned building. But it's incredible how many abandoned farms there are in the prairies now. This one was kind of fun, and I spent a long time trying to figure out what I could do to emphasize these two. But in my mind, again, I'm showing this because in my mind it was going to be a black and white image.
How did you get the second cross like that?
Well, it's there. It was a foggy day. Could barely drive. Just horseshoes.
But it looks like a reflection.
It's not a reflection. There's a huge cross and a smaller cross.
Wow.
I know. Wow. And anyway, it's unfortunate. Oh, I shouldn't say. I'll say nothing. Anyway, it is it's a pilgrimage to pro-life when you suddenly start reading and realize what you're upon. So anyway, it's interesting. And then I love trying to, in black and white, try to use environment to make images work. Again, this could work in color, but to my mind, I'm just showing what I transitioned into black and white and which ones I didn't as I move along. Mark always brings a local photographer along from the areas, which is kind of fun because they have a whole different insight into what's happening, a different perspective. This one I tried to turn into black and white, couldn't get an image out no matter what I did. So I'm not always, going to take everything into a black and white situation. Again, this is called the Black Church. So anyway, again, color I worked way better for this friend that came to visit us. This one, boy, I struggle with this like crazy, and I never. These isolated trees in the prairies are quite something because you go forever. There's not a tree, and suddenly one sticks up. I kind of wanted to really isolate it and demonstrate what it was all about in the middle of nowhere. But I thought it worked better in color, and I thought it worked better with. And this is strictly pulling clarity back. So a little trick for all three of you, if you don't use it, if you're trying to get an image that you want to, leave as realistic, you've got it in a class, say press or something, and you can't change anything. By just changing the clarity, suddenly this tree pops out because it's got high clarity up front. The rest of the image fell back away from it. So I'm able to isolate the tree away from, the signature of the other part of the image. Didn't work in black and white for me, no matter what I did. So I'm not always fixed on it's got to go to a black and white to be a good image. Again, anytime you got lots of texture, you can work a black and white in really well. This one was really fun because it was shooting through an old truck that sort of brought me forward. Was looking back, but looking forward. Again, I tried this in color, no luck. This church, which is abandoned but open, again, it to me, I was shooting this in black and white when I took the images. But there's the color image inside the church, and perhaps it works better. That's pigeon shit all over the place. Sort of, most of us were smart enough to wear masks inside. And the grate on the right's interesting because the furnace, of course, the fire would be started below the church in the basement to keep it warm during services, and the heat would come up through that big vent. Anyway, this is not lit. This is window light doing what I've got going on. And again, I do have a tripod going for this one because I'm at 1/20th of a second on it. I'm going to flip forward a little bit and start into some conversions just so don't waste your time. But not every image do I take to black and white. I play with, will the color work with it too when I'm out there working on an image. Good old boys. Every time you start and set up your tripod, the hunky-dories, the Ukrainians come along and talk to you. These guys had lived there for 3 generations and told me all the history on this church, which is really quite amazing. Again, I couldn't get it to work in black and white, so I stay in the color. Went back to the same scene again when the snow had blown away and got a different black and white image out of it. Again, this one in my mind was black and white, not color, but other people would want to keep it in a color setting. And this is a color image, you know, all these little diners all in the middle of nowhere. You know, you take that thing into black and white, it doesn't make it look any older. So, you know, I just don't spend my time in black and white only, especially when color's popping out at you. This one I tried like crazy to get in black and white, but it just never worked. Again, I couldn't get a black and white out of that image. I tried with it. This is interesting. Here's the color. Here's the black and white. And I could, if I were doing something, I'd work on it a lot more and build up the contrast on it. But it just takes an image and kind of, in my mind, takes authenticity on timing. Kent, there's lots of detail in the snow there for you too, so we're okay.
So noted.
So noted. And this one is a hard one to convert to black and white to get the feeling of the drifting snow and the coldness. But anyway, so I think I'm going to stop there and jump over to. I stayed. We were with Mark for a couple of days, and I went off on my own for another week, which was the fun time seeing what I could find on my own as I drifted about. This is in beautiful Nokomis, Saskatchewan, home of one of my really good buddies. And he said, well, that's the International Harvester store. And gave me the history and all the people that lived there or worked there and everything. It was kind of fun to listen to the history of Nokomis, which is now pretty much abandoned for the most part. Again, the age-wise, I see this in black and white when I took the image. Others could argue. If you want to sell the postcard, the color will work. If you want to sell the vintage, the black and white works for me.
Just another comment, Paul. Just was
Yep.
going to say, sometimes you have really bad light, and black and white will save the day.
Yes, yes.
Would you agree?
Absolutely. Well, look at the sky in this one up top, right? And then what I've done when I go into this one, I will have gone in and selectively used the red channel, like the red filters we used to put on our cameras, and the sky, been able to save a fair bit of it. It's a little more interesting sky in black and white than it is in the, you know, and very often you're right, you want to be midday with the highest contrast in order to get images that you're looking for. So you know, a cloudy day is not always your friend in black and white. And this one, I'm going to talk about this one quite a bit when I get working further on, but I saw this image. I had to drive around and go back for it, but I saw this in black and white, or black and white, or black and white. And I think we'll work this image up if that's okay. Anyway, enough of images. If we talk about wide load, that's a wide load. Any questions before I get into doing a conversion? Is this
here?
Huh? Let's
Just
take.
a quick question. Do you do anything with animals from time to time? Well, you did that. You did a whale breaching last year, right?
Yep.
In black and white.
Yep.
Yeah.
I love doing animals in black and white, especially polar bears.
Right.
So the answer is yes, but it's got to work and be isolated. And I'll tell
Right.
you that if you're going to put it into PPOC, be very cautious about taking an animal image and turning it to black and white, because the judges see animals in color. They've seen them in color. They're not very familiar with them in black and white. So it can be a difficult thing to present. In other competitions, world wildlife competitions, black and whites do extremely well. So,
Well, if you got a black whale, it's probably okay.
yeah. Okay, so this is the image we're going to work up, if that's okay. And when I was driving by, this is what I saw. This is the raw. Yes, this is the raw. So this is my crop. I'm using a Nikon Z8. My settings are ISO 64, which is the native ISO for the Z8. I can get my best resolution, best images out of it. If I wasn't at 64 and I had to move up, I'd go possibly 160 or 400. Those are the steps where they work better. And my lens, I just got till I had the recession feeling that I wanted from these. I probably spent 20 minutes till I got the poles where I wanted them to be. I know that sounds kind of crazy. I could not get rid of the two horizontal poles on the skyline over on the right. They were there for good. But that was just the way it was.
You achieved isolation of each of the poles very well.
As many as I could, and it sounds simple, but at 125, I couldn't get isolation. At 200, I got intersection gain. So 175 was the one that worked. And this was probably a 1 hour setup before I actually took the picture. It sounds crazy. And I was right beside a very busy highway. It was a very unpleasant setting, to be quite honest.
What lens?
It would have been probably the 100 to 400.
Okay, and you're at a zoom of 175?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If I'd had a 100 to, or at least a 70 to 200, that would have been my lens. My 24 to 120 would not have been enough to got what I needed on this one. That was my vision though. And then at the right hand side, I didn't leave any more power lines because I knew where I wanted them to come in for balance, and I was bombastically confident it was going to work like that. And you notice I put in a +1 compensation because I just know in this image it's going to darken the snow down like crazy. And I only know that from shooting on snow a lot. So I put it in right away so I could get my histogram. I wanted some margins on both sides. I wanted some latitude to work with this. Okay. Any questions about the front end of the picture? Steve, are you okay?
Yeah, no, good.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to bring this up into Photoshop, and it goes right into Adobe Camera Raw. All right. So this is just plain old Photoshop, Adobe Camera Raw. And I should be pulling these all on my own, but I almost always start with just see what auto is going to do with it. And when I push the auto, I then work on that. So it's got it's brought the blacks down automatically, in this in this situation. It's brought my whites down a little bit rather than up because it's recording what's going on in here. I am introducing some transition in the sky, which I'm going to have to be careful with. So you can notice there's phasic transition in the sky to deal with, and it's taken my contrast up. So if we just click it over to what it's going to do in black and white, so I've already done the auto color correction, and then I use just Photoshop black and white. I've got a pretty uninteresting image for a black and white image. I've also got a sensor spot here I can see. But I know this is what I want to work on. So is everybody with me so far?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And so believe it or not, I may go down to effects, first of all, and just before I get any brightness or anything, I'm just going to work on see what happens. And I'll reset these to 0. But I want to know later on what's going to happen if I bring up my dehaze. You see, I've got if you look at the poles, let's just look selectively around here at this pole. If I bring up my dehaze, which is again, detail in the mid-tones with some contrast on it, it really, this is overdone, but it really brings up this pole. Like suddenly I've got a dynamic pole with all sorts of shape to it. Does that make sense, everybody?
Yeah.
Can't really
Yes.
find suddenly two really quite dynamic poles. And I would be willing with this image to actually make a new layer this further in the Photoshop, bring dehaze way hell up, and then brush in on a layer these poles just to make them really stand out like they do. So I'm not going to do it right now, but I'm just saying that that it brings it up. And again, on Photoshop, you can play with it. If you want to bring it back to 0, just double click on the slider, and it'll bring it back to 0. I want to see how much clarity I can get in this image when I come back to it. Here's a lot more clarity. Again, the clarity, just think about the poles, how the clarity really pops these puppies out. And also it's going to add to the waves down below. I'll do this one more time. Just looking now, just look at the snow in this area here and see what clarity does to the, see how it adds dimensionality to it and recession. So I know that these are going to be pretty darn good. Okay. Any questions on, and I'll come back to these, but I just wanted to sort of, in my mind, see how much I can get with those two in this image. So I'm pretty happy with it. Questions? Make sense?
So far, so good.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all good.
There's a little thing called black and white mixer. And this is like taking a black and white image and putting a red filter on the front of your camera, like we used to in the old days for skies. So not a bad idea to see what a red filter is going to do to the sky. And in this case, almost nothing. There's not enough blue in it to really, excuse me, do anything. But it's a good thing to sort of always have up your sleeve. Selectively, what are you doing with your the colors in a black and white? And here, you notice when I do my blue, it's gonna, I can bring the sky up. I had that phasic kind of gradation with it. So by playing with the blues, you can bring up that sky to pure white if you want. Okay, so these are things that we might come up and play with again. If you had greens like grass sticking through, you might take it to change the greens in it, but there's not much in this picture. I've got some magentas, some blues, and a little touch of purple in this image. I don't have any reds. I don't have any greens really. So, but remember this B&W mixer down here can do a lot for your image. I mean, a lot of people would just be blown away if they sort of suddenly saw what you did with just the blues. I mean, you got a dynamic image out of it all of a sudden just with that. Okay, so let's pretend we're starting all over at the beginning, and I'm going to go up to light, which is exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, and what it's done. And so an Ansel Adams sort of black and white, you could just take the contrast way up. There's contrast down. Here's contrast up. A lot of contrast. You could go over and open up your whites till you get Kent nervous, blowing out the whites. And you can take the blacks all the way down. And right off the bat, you kind of got a high contrast black and white out of this. Now, it's too dark. Yeah, it's too dark. So, but you bring up the exposure of the entire image. Does that make sense?
You bet.
And so
Yes.
What I just did there is not magic. And what I did is what I do for most of my images that you see, that come up in competition and stuff. Those three little moves are what I've done. Honestly, I feel like an imposter speaking to you people because I don't do very much that's all that exciting. And then I would go down after I've done those three up front. And again, I got my initial boost from auto. It sort of showed me where to go. And I I can then start working with my dehaze to see if I can work the poles a little bit. Again, I introduce vignette with it, so that's maybe not a good thing, but I can get a little bit with it. And my clarity, I can try taking it way down. It's like I got a pencil diagram to way up to, you know, overburdened on it. But if you wanted to, if you think that was the effect for this image, you know, you could look at doing that. One of the recovery things you can do quite often is to use this thing called optics and just go down and look at your vignette and see if you can get rid of some of your vignette with through the optics. You can get some of that off with optics with it. Okay, so go back to light again. I would, in this case, I'd be allowed to remove these sensor spots that I've got here. But let's just say the sky, Photoshop really helps you a lot. So I'm going to go into masking tools. Everybody follow me on the right-hand side with my cursor up to masking tools.
Yes.
Yep.
3 out of 3, good?
Yes.
Okay, and I just gone to the sky. Okay, so it's going to bring up the sky. And I just want the sky, so I'm going to just put in subtract and use the brush and just make sure I get rid of this overflow here in the snow here down below. See, it's bled over into it. It's bled over into a lot of the poles too. This is for you know, example only, but this is a good place where you can start to work on, say, going down to your dehaze if you want to pull up more dehaze in it. I don't want to on this one, but anyway, or take it the other way too to make it into a monochromatic sky. You can go up and find your whites and take the sky, you know, down, or in this case, up to bring the whites out of the way with it. It's amazing how the cloud, this one little cloud that I couldn't see on the initial image, is still there at this stage with it. And I've done no sharpening on this. This is an image I probably would never put any sharpening on because it's there already. The worst thing you can do is possibly over sharpen an image like this, and somebody pops up to 100% and gives you kind of grief about it. So I think I might be wise to just stop right now and just take some questions. We'll do another image, but I'm just showing you the process. So first of all, in my mind, this is a black and white. I had the gesture, emotion, the focus, isolation that I wanted in this image. I knew it was going to go to black and white. And then I've really done very basic things with it in Photoshop by pushing auto, then black and white, and then just adding contrast, adding clarity, little dehaze, and then playing with my black and whites to make it acceptable.
Oh, Paul, what tool do you use to get rid of sensor dust?
Oh, I would take it into many ways, but we're allowed to get rid of sensor dust. So I would open it now from Adobe Camera Raw into Photoshop. I'm now in Photoshop, and I would probably just use the brush tool, B, okay? And then bring it up to an appropriate size. And the, what's the right term for the square bracket keys? Anyway,
square bracket key.
Square bracket keys, bring it up and down. And I always find that I'm better to go to at least 100% when I'm dealing with this, so I don't overshoot it. So I would now just, and also it's got the, when I'm doing this brush tool, I'm very careful to get my size first, but also I've selected a soft brush and my hardness is 0. So I will not end up with an edge here that's going to end up, you know, picking up any of the detail around here that's got edge to it. So I did a good job on it, didn't it? Yeah. I do wrong here.
I'm surprised you're not using the heal tool.
Sorry,
Paul.
spot healing brush is what I meant.
Yeah.
So spot healing brush. Sorry, Kim.
Yeah.
And again, hardness. You don't want it hard. Spacing, working about around 20-25%. Bring it up to the right size and just pop over top of it. You don't need a whole lot of extra room around it.
So if you were
You-
to use the cloning tool in lighten mode and drop your percentage down to 1 or 2% and sample around that spot,
Yeah.
would that be an okay alternative tool?
Yep. Right now I'm in brush stamp tool, clone stamp tool. So clone stamp tool, I'd select out here beside it and then go in and just take her off. And if I'm doing something where the other one, this one, the spot healing brush does a lot quickly. So you got specks all over the place. But if I'm doing something that I want to have really completed, I go to S, stamp tool. And as you say, I would select beside it and then brush in with it.
Paul, I found just staying in Camera Raw or Lightroom, you can, it's very effective for, if you just went over where you found the, if you went back to your Camera Raw, what you did before,
Yep.
and then you just go over to the right and you find the healing brush options there. Let's see. One of those there.
Yeah.
It's the one, sorry, I can't see very well on mine.
Remove.
Remove tool, yeah.
Yeah,
Use that
yeah,
one.
Yeah, I've
Give
done
that
it
one,
here.
give it a try. It's
I-
really, it
yeah.
works.
Yeah, I've done
I
it
know.
here, but I like to have the full file over as I build in my PSDs. So
Yeah,
this is very good if I'm just going to flash it out and go with it, but I like building up and I can take that layer in or out as I go further along. That's my reasoning in using it in
well,
photo.
yeah, if you put it into a smart object and then,
Yeah,
then you can go back into your Camera Raw and fix it. But if you're working with layers, then I hear what you're saying. You have to be able to look at it, take it out. If
Yeah.
you turn it off, and you can see how it's affecting things. But yeah,
Yeah.
I
And
just
this-
find
yeah.
that remove tool works really well.
Yeah,
I
it
use
is.
it mostly in Lightroom, but
And in this image, I put in World Photographic Cup and it made it through to the third round, but it got rejected in the end by these posts. It just bothered them too much. And of course you can't take anything out in the World Photographic Cup competition. But anyway,
right.
it did pretty well down the road, much to my surprise, actually, because this is one I didn't know how I was going to do with the judges, for competition. But I liked it myself. That's all that really counts.
So Paul, you're saying you do pretty much all your conversion in ACR?
Yes,
You don't do layers in Photoshop once you brought it in?
I do. Let's do one in. I do now. Now I get into my layers here. If I were say, so now I'm going to make a new layer, and say I want to. Let's go and really pop up these these poles. So I've made a new layer. I'd go back into Adobe Camera Raw and I'd go down to the dehaze area and I'm going to really dehaze the hell out of these poles, right? Brought it back into Photoshop and I have put a mask over top of it and then I would brush in what am I at here? 100%. This is not going to be perfect, but I would brush something like take the time to brush this in. Now here you can see I've blown out the side. I would be doing this at about 400% if I were doing it. So that's where some of my layers are done in Photoshop.
Paul, what's the color? You can add color while you're doing that. How do you do that again? I can't remember. So as you're painting, it shows up as a color.
Oh, I can't remember either. I think I showed it to you and I can't remember now.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, it is. There's a way. It's something like Control S or something, but it's not on my mind right now.
Yeah.
I have to do a bunch of images all at one time, then all this crap comes back to my feeble mind.
This is a lot of work.
It is. It's a lot of work, but I didn't say it was going to be simple.
Not with all those details. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And the details sort of sound like I'm stirring over a cauldron, but in fact, I'm just using basic Photoshop stuff, really. And then I can achieve images that I kind of feel that are, what I'm trying to get directively.
Yeah. Did you have that much of a vignette on your image when you finished?
No, I would go in, I would probably make another layer and then reverse that one out. And yeah. In fact, my cloud I didn't have a cloud because this sky was so white, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would have gone back and put more white into it. Okay, don't save that. No. Do you want to work through one more, or everybody sort of had their fill already?
No, continue.
Sure.
Keep going.
Huh?
Keep going.
Okay,
Yep, keep going.
I'll go through one more, and this one I actually submitted in color, but I shot it for black and white, to be quite honest. And it looks like a pretty flat monochromatic image, but in my mind, I shot it on a tripod, 4 minutes, with a 16 stop neutral density filter on it, so it's 240 seconds. I have a very specific, at a 14 millimeter wide lens, I have a very specific formula for shooting long exposures. They're all 4 minutes long. I get everything so that I get my metering on the front end, so it's going to work well. But I find that if I'm at 6400 or 64 ISO and I go for 4 minutes, I don't have a whole lot of noise reduction problems to work with. It just works for me. But this is in Iceland, very flat image. That's exactly what it was like at the time I took it. And there's a single, I positioned myself, I had a single truck that would not frickin' move. I waited forever, but it was, I guess, there for the night. Sorry, it was there for the night. So I was kind of stuck. But I took this for black and white. And there were lots of people walking around. Like, this was just filled with people up here, all taking their little selfie images. But of course, at 4 minutes, they don't show up in the image. So this is, a crowded space with lots of tourists, people walking down here and all over the place. But if they don't stay for more than 2 minutes, they don't show up in the image. Does that make
It was
sense?
hard to do at Peggy's Cove.
Yeah.
People tend to stand there too long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's bring this thing, I'm bringing it into Adobe Camera Raw again. All right.
Yeah.
So start this. Let's just go straight to black and white. Let's not see what it does just in a black and white conversion. And all it's done is really desaturated. So that's why you kind of want to go to and there's, if you start in black and white and then go over and do auto, you can see it's started to do its own thing. So you hit kind of both of them in order to get this guy going.
Paul, do you ever look at up here? You have the option of different profiles, Adobe profiles.
Yep.
Do you ever go in there and see what options you have in terms of just
Yeah.
It's sort of like Nick to me.
Yeah.
If you browse.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. The one that sort of is fastest is if you go to Adobe Vivid, you can see eventually what you're going to get if you get lots of contrast in it.
Right.
But
if you go down, it has all sorts of black and white options as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I find that if I start where I know and I kind of know Adobe Color,
yeah,
I'll be better off, because with the Vivid, when you start to bring this area up, which looks like black right now, a black hole, you can end up having a lot of aberrant colors. I find magenta gets introduced, which I don't know what to do with. I'm not smart enough, so I do stay away from that with it. So let's again, we're in auto. Let's go over to black and white again for a starting point with it. And then what I would do right off the bat is see where I can start with my sky. So I'm going to go and pull the sky up. And then I'm going to go right away down to dehaze. Again, dehaze is smart sharpening, detail, and contrast in the mid areas. So it's not going to blow this out so much that I lose my clouds. Does that make sense to everybody? I go right to dehaze and just watch what happens on this long exposure as I introduce dehaze into this. Suddenly I have a lot of my drama that I'm looking for in this image right off
You
the
get
bat.
any haloing at the transition point?
You could. I found in the latest Adobe Camera Raw, I haven't. But let's take this up to 1,000,000%, see if it's haloing there. Do you see haloing anywhere there, Ken?
Just a little bit.
Yeah. Okay.
You'd have to go in there to clean that up.
Yeah. Although if you take it, you know, and I print, I won't notice it. I can guarantee you that. There's 100%. And so, yeah, you can go and clean it up. How do you clean it up, Kent? What's your favorite garbage cleanup?
Masking with painting with black or painting with white, depending on the area I'm working at.
Yeah.
It's only critical if my images go up to 30, 40 and larger.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions on the dehaze, what it did with the selective sky?
Do you ever get banding?
Not on a big raw image like this.
Something tells me I'm going to be spending money to buy my Adobe package monthly now.
Okay, let's play with the clarity a little bit here. Take the clarity down or up, and again, it's to taste. What do you how much do you want to introduce there? And again, you can say you're getting black with no details, so you have to be a little careful on the clarity. But it's you know, really with those two sliders alone, not looking at the rest of the image, just the sky, been able to achieve a fair amount with it. If we go into contrast up top, again, contrast may be your enemy a little bit. You can lighten the clouds up ever so slightly by decreasing the contrast on them. And if you think you're getting into blown out, although I know I'm not up here, if you thought that's going to be perceived as blown out, you can then work selectively on your whites. Blown out. I can see the blowout on this, but you can bring your whites down just ever so slightly on that to improve it. Your blacks, if you think you're too deep on them, it's a place you can lighten up your blacks, which I don't really want to do too much. I like where they sit right now. I'd rather go into, but the cloud activity, and it's to taste. I mean, everybody on this call is going to use the sky, create it in a different fashion. Does that make sense?
Totally.
All right.
Yes.
And this is not like a Donald Trump agree. It's just that's what's kind of worked for me. So I'm going to go back off the mask to the whole image right now. The top of Photoshop, Adobe Camera Raw, there's this slider thing that just takes you back to the entire image. So you're working on the entire image right now. And this is a place where you can select objects to bring them up. So again, you can go back into your masking and bring up select objects. And then with the select objects, you can sort of figure out an area that you sort of want to be doing some lightening with. And I know that this area in here is going to take quite a bit of lightening in order to get the image working. So it'll fill in. Yeah, didn't on this one. Huh. Anyway.
Yes, it's an aside for everyone, if you don't mind, Paul.
Yeah.
For those who may not know Brian Lee from Fanshawe College in London, Ontario, he was our past PPOC chair as well as an incredible lecturer. He used to teach photography at Fanshawe, and his method of teaching renditions of color was to force his students to work in black and white, to do all the corrections in black and white, and then when you convert it back into color, it's instantly exactly where you need it to be. So this technique of yours, Paul, is reminding me of Brian's technique.
Yeah. I'm just going to go back into Adobe Camera Raw where I was, and let's just concentrate on this one on the details and the shadows and the darkness here. So if we start bringing up the shadows, we're just going to look over at those areas. It brings it up quite a bit. I've really achieved a lot of what I want to do in bringing up the shadows over there. The problem is that down the road when you get going at it, when you get going with it, you're going to end up with artifacts and noise and all kinds of problems in here. It just, there's all kinds of stuff I'd have to be dealing with in here, eliminating these little white spots that I've brought up through this process. So let's get rid of the shadow. So what I would do to bring up this area is to take it into Photoshop, create a new layer. Poor Margie goes crazy because I'm always building new layers for everything. But anyway, and then I would go now on this new layer that I've got over here. I'm going to go back into Adobe Camera Raw, and rather than bring up shadows, I'm going to bring the exposure up. Don't worry about the rest of the image, but I'm just trying to bring up the parts that I need to do, and I've got way more control by just using the exposure than I do, and I can bring my blacks down a little bit.
And that doesn't affect the noise introduction?
There's way less noise when you just use exposure on the entire image than if you do shadow recovery. I don't know why it happens, Kent, but I'm just saying that's what I would be doing. And then I open this up in Photoshop, put a mask on it, and then I'm going to brush in these areas.
That's cool.
And again, white reveals, black conceals. So I'm going to bring these guys in where I want them here in this image. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but just to give you the idea of it, that the dark areas, I'll be able to achieve what I want through this. And I would do multiple layers. This is too bright here, this part. So I would not do all of that. I would, and if I do too much, of course, you just push X. This is going to change over here. Black conceals, white reveals. And if you just want to reveal a little bit, you put your flow down. So my flow down to say 25%. Then when I'm introducing the brightness in here, I haven't got as much ink on the brush when I'm doing it. Say if I want to build some of these areas up a little more. I could get to 100%. If I kept going 4 times, I've now given 100%. But at 25%, I can reduce it a bit more. So I spend a lot of time working back and forth. So yeah, it's a dance on something like this to get it to a final, summation with it.
Which makes your work even more awesome there, Paul.
Well, it's not awesome. I get lucky once in a while,
That's what I call the right attitude.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
Paul, have you experimented with luminosity masks and painting?
I have, yeah. And I love luminosity masks, except I find them a lot of work. I can achieve with what I just showed you in my images way faster than using luminosity masks. Luminosity masks, Steve, I find especially good in trees, like in really, I've got little sticky trees all over the place. Luminosity mask is fabulous.
Well, even on that power line shot, I would have thought you could use a luminosity mask there. Select the
Yeah, I did.
Convert it and then just paint it in on the poles.
I did try it actually, and unfortunately, the tonality of the silver pole versus the sky is too close. It didn't work for me.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was close, close. And I thought, well, I went back at it in color again. Actually learned a lot from that image. If you guys got your videos turned off, there you go. Why don't you turn yourselves back on again? Yeah, that's good.
Oh,
So
we're still there.
yeah. So listen, I'll be happy to send you this recording along. And
Please do. Thank you.
God, it's longer than
Please.
I talked way longer than I thought. Was this of any help? I mean, it may be something you guys will never use, but you know, all of you ask me, how do you do your black and whites? Well, that's how I do them from the ground up. And it just gives me the artistic control that I want without killing any pixels.
Yeah, well,
No, you've affirmed some things that I do already and other things that I don't do. So that's absolutely marvelous.
well, I've always done the black and white conversions in Photoshop proper. I've never even attempted it in ACR, so I learned a lot today. Like I didn't, it makes so much more sense to do it in ACR than.
You'll noise just kind of is not your enemy anymore, and
Yeah.
contrast. And I find that if I'm in like in Photoshop, you asked, do you get a halo with it? Yeah, I get big halos in Photoshop, but I don't seem to get them in Adobe Camera Raw. I seem to have less work to do on that. So that's just what I've found.
Yeah. Well, it's brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you,
Well,
Paul.
it's
Yeah,
not
thanks,
brilliant.
Paul.
Like I said, I'm not an expert. I'm just experienced in making all the mistakes, you know.
Well, all it takes sometimes, like I had actually never even thought of doing black and white in ACR before. I've always struggled with it in Photoshop layers. So yeah, all it takes is somebody to turn the light on.
And it may not work for you. And this is not how Mark Kegel does it. He's all over in Photoshop, and everything is luminosity masking, and I've
But
got
doesn't he shoot with a black and white a monochrome camera too?
sometimes when I've been with him, he's always borrowed my camera.
Oh,
So yeah, he does. He's got a fancy black and white one that he uses. But if he's out on the fly, he'll use the 35 millimeter and convert over from it.
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the trouble with his big black and white camera is really hard to use in cold temperatures. I'm pretty much only been with him when it's been minus 20.
Mm.
Mhm.
And that's why you use the Z9 and gloves,
And mitts, yeah.
mitts. I got to get those mitts.
Any mitts will do. Yeah.
Yeah, I've tried to do a lot of this in Lightroom, and I'm finding it's just about the same as what you did in ACR. But you know, the adding the layer at the end, which you showed me, I don't know that I could achieve that in, but I think I could by creating a new um, a new mask, I guess,
Yeah.
in Lightroom, and then just brushing in and using very low, like you did, low flow, and brushing it into those areas that you lightened by the waterfall.
Yeah.
A lot of it, I think I could still achieve in Lightroom without having to go into Photoshop forever, whatever. But I'm still scared of Photoshop regardless.
I congratulate you in being able to work with smart objects, because I'm pretty good if I work with a smart object and use it within a couple of weeks after producing it. But the ones I go back years later, I have so much trouble figuring what the hell I did in them. You know, I just I've given up on smart objects because I always shoot myself in my foot if I have to do something 3 or 4 years later.
I'm certainly not, not coherent in it either. So
Yeah, no, I should be better at it, but I'm not. It's like I don't use Lightroom because I don't know how to use it. I've gone to many courses on it, but when I worked with Jillian Shatnoff, we used Lightroom for a period of time. But the freaking thing, you wanted to get an image, you had to go back to that hard drive, and she would have it, and I'd have the other hard drive, and they were all freaking all over the place. And I after a while, I just gave up. So that's the only reason I don't use Lightroom, but it's superb. And Adobe Camera Raw and Lightroom at the front are identical. You know, they're the same.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much. That was really useful and great. Great to have that. All the showing us all those techniques that you use.
Yeah,
Okay.
nice meeting you, Margie.
Nice meeting you.
Yeah, Margie, you're not coming to Kamloops now, I hear. So
Well, yeah, there's a lot going on.
yeah. Oh, are you coming up?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh, good.
Perfect.
As of today, I'm coming up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, we'll see you there, Paul.
Okay.
We'll see you soon too, Steve.
Yep.
All right.
Thanks, Steve.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Hey,
Thank
thanks.
you. Thanks,
Bye
Paul.
now.
Thank you again, Paul.
Okay.
Hope you're